Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube. I'm here to cough myself to death. No, I'm here to do my continue. God. I'm here to continue my read-along reviews of John Philip Betancourt's Return of Dark Shadows, Series 4, Chapter 7, Withering of Souls. Oftentimes in Collingwood is left out on its hills, basking in the light of the many stars that shine down on it, like a glowing beacon and symbol of the Collins family wealth and power throughout the centuries. The night in particular was a vibrant one, filled with the familiar sounds of the sea crashing up against the rocks that filled the main drawing room, where Carolyn sat with the window open, listening and reading, the lights dim, her mind calm. She had lived on this property for decades as a young woman, and just up until the late 80s before she moved to London, where she met her husband Jack Thorne, who's dead. She It's every wall, it's every secret passage, and all its hidden treasure. But there were two others who knew the place even better, Barnabas and her cousin David Collins. In her quiet movement, Carolyn became distracted while reading by her own thoughts and dropped the book to her lap and stared out the open French doors and watched the trees sway back and forth in the elegant summer breeze. Refreshing, isn't it? I had forgotten how fresh the air was here in the summer, a voice said from behind. Carolyn turned and saw David, free from his torture at Wincliffe, standing in the foyer looking into the drawing room. At first she thought she was dreaming, but as she came closer and into the light of the drawing room, dim as it was, she knew he was real. David had finally returned home. Oh my God. David! Carolyn said, bouncing off the sofa and rushing in for a hug. It's really you. Who did you think I'd be? I guess after 20 years away, there's no one else that could be, David laughed. You'd be surprised, Carolyn quipped back. I guess I would, David giggled, remembering stranger things have happened at Collingwood. Caleb and Kat are sleeping, but I know he wouldn't mind if I woke them to see you. Oh, he's going to be elated when he finds out you're here, Carolyn said, starting off to wake Caleb. No, don't. It's okay. I'll wait until morning. I don't want to wake him, David said, grabbing Carolyn's hand. Well, if you're sure, David, where have you been? What happened? We've been so worried for so many years. And then Caleb finds the letter and the trace it back to Wincliffe. It's all so confusing, Carolyn asked, pulling herself back to the sofa and sitting David down with her. It's a very long story. I remember it that I was taken from here by two men to Wincliffe, and there I've been all these years. I'm actually very interested in seeing Kimberly soon. I take it she's living here too, David said. She is. I actually fought against, I assure you, but Caleb insisted. I am so glad you're home, Carolyn said. How did you escape that place? You'll never believe it if I told you, but it's true. Maggie, it was Maggie Evans. Apparently she's been there for a long time too, and she helped me. I tried to bring her here, but she wouldn't come, David explained. What are you talking about? Carolyn said with a shocked expression. Maggie helped me escape, David said again. Maggie Evans? No, you must have thought it was her, because it's not possible, Carolyn said, now standing up and walking towards the open French doors. What do you mean? Maggie died a long time ago, in 1998 or 1999. I can't remember the exact date, but I know that when I heard the news shortly after I moved to England, so I could be her, Carolyn said. During their conversation, which began to switch from happy to bizarre, Barnabas had come in from the old house, undetected. He saw David and Caroline talking, and instinctively hid so that he could hear them talk freely. He came in at the right moment, the moment that mattered to him most, Maggie Evans. "No, Carolyn, it was her. I know it was her. She told me. Well, I just know it was her. I felt her body. We hugged goodbye. Maggie is not dead," David said sternly. "I don't know what to tell you, but it's true. She killed herself in that hospital. It was a very terrible thing," Carolyn said, bowing her head. "I know what I saw, Carolyn. I saw her. We touched. She broke into the room I was in, and she helped me escape. I don't know where she is now, but I know that she helped me," David continued. Okay. Well, whoever it was, Maggie or not, I'm certainly glad she came to your rescue. And you must be exhausted and hungry. The cook was about to make me some tea before she left for the evening. Why don't I ask her to make you a sandwich? It won't take long. Sit down and I'll be right back," Carolyn said, trying to calm David. David nodded in agreement, and Carolyn went off into a hallway that stretched all the way down to the main kitchen. She walked quickly, and from out of the shadowy corner, his eyes wide and serious, jumped Barnabas, startling Carolyn so much she backed into the wall, knocking over a vase. "Barnabas!" she yelled. "Good morning, cousin," he said, noting the evening hour as his morning. "What do you want?" Carolyn asked. Her fear was that he would find David, and for some reason she did not want him to. "I do not like when things are kept from me, you know, and when I returned I felt that you and I were on the same footing, the same common ground, and I could count on you," Barnabas said coldly. "That was before I realized that you hadn't changed and that you were still the same soulless creature from 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, from whatever world or time you belong." "What do you want?" Carolyn said sternly. "Maggie," he responded. "What? Barnabas, please. I don't know what you're—" Carolyn said before Barnabas stopped her. "I heard you and our returned cousin David speaking of her, and I know she's alive. I know it. Last night Kimberly took me to her grave. I saw it, but I do not believe it. Maggie is alive, and I want to know where she is," Barnabas said. Carolyn took a deep breath and realized that now something was definitely amiss. If David saw Maggie at Wincliffe, and Barnabas saw some sort of vision of her that didn't convince him she was dead, then Maggie must be alive and hiding. "If you saw her at her grave, then she's dead," Carolyn said sternly. "You forget. I know what the dead are like. I know what it feels like to have the blood in your veins grow cold. What I saw at the cemetery was something different." She shivered in the cold, Carolyn. Her skin was peach and soft. "Like this," Barnabas said, grabbing Carolyn's arm tightly. "I can't explain why she looked the way she did, so let go," Carolyn said, thrusting her arm out of Barnabas's cold hand. "Whoever David saw, or whoever helped him get away from that place, I'm grateful for. But I know that Maggie Evans died. So why can't you let that go?" she added. "Because it's a lie. Because it's something that is being hidden from me. Now tell me, Carolyn. Tell me now. Where is Maggie Evans?" Barnabas growled. Carolyn had to make another impossible decision, but she knew it had to be done. Her old friend Maggie, alive or dead, needed to be found. In order to protect David, who Carolyn wasn't even sure was in the right mind space after spending all those years trapped in a mental hospital. "I want you to know one thing. You will leave David alone. I do not want him seeing you, Barnabas, Carolyn said sternly. Barnabas thought for a second and agreed to not reveal himself to David just yet in exchange for the whereabouts of Maggie Evans. Where is she? Barnabas growled again. Wincliffe Sanitarium, Carolyn said with reluctantly, and in truth, she wasn't even sure Maggie was there. But David believed it. So to her, it must be somewhat true. Barnabas's eyes turned pitch black. In a puff of black smoke, the darkest Carolyn had ever seen disappeared as soon as he got the information. He so desperately wanted everybody in Wincliffe's dead now. I don't know. He had no intention of following through with possibly ending his own life by stepping into sunlight and vaping into air now that there could be a possibility Maggie was alive. Barnabas's instincts was right. He felt her life force, and now there was no stopping him. Carolyn stood in the hall just outside the kitchen. For a second, the feeling of guilt slowly reaching for her throat like she was being buried alive tightened like a noose. If Maggie was really still alive, she had just given Barnabas the one man Maggie feared most in her entire life, her location. What had she done? The evening progressed within the walls of Collinwood, even with David's return still mostly unknown to the rest of the house. Kimberly was out somewhere. Christopher, Caleb, and Kat had turned into bed early. Claudia, on the other hand, had a certain job to do in regards to her rivalry with Alexandra, who had returned home early that evening from the Blue Whale. Claudia carefully walked up the main staircase and down the hall to Alexander's room. The door had been left slightly open enough that Claudia could peek in without being seen. There Alexander sat in a chair looking over a small table. As Claudia looked closer, she could see Alexander was reading the tarot cards. Alex's eyes were rolled back, and she had 8 cards on a table with her hands slightly over them. She was humming something Claudia couldn't understand. Suddenly, a burst of energy flung the door open, and pushed Claudia inside of the room where Alex was waiting for her. It's rude to lurk in doorways, Alexandra said as she slowly turned her head to see Claudia, standing firmly now in the room. It's also bad luck to read your own fortune. Didn't Mommy ever teach you that? Claudia responded equally as tough. Given everything that's happened in this room, you remember the whole mirror thing? I wouldn't peg you for someone who would want to dabble in the dark arts ever again, Claudia added. I'm not reading my fortune, I'm reading yours, Alex said coldly. Well, how kind of you, but I already know what my fortune will bring, much happiness with Christopher, Claudia said, digging into Alex's heart. You stole him from me, Alex said in a raised voice. It wasn't yours to steal, Alexander. It's a shame you can't understand that. All your life you've been given the royal treatment, haven't you? No one has ever asked you to take responsibility. I never made Christopher leave you for me. He chose to, Claudia responded. Alexander didn't react to what Claudia called malicious insult. All she did was sit at the table and flip her tarot card over one by one, so that now 12 were revealed. Tis, 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 Alex hissed in disappointment over the results of a tear of her cards. Doesn't look so good for you, Claudia, but this 13th card will tell me your final fate. The most important card of all, Alex said, as she slowly turned the card over, revealing the death card. Uh-oh, death. So dramatic, Alexander giggled. You're losing your mind. I should have never given you these powers, Claudia responded as she fiddled with the small bag in her pocket with the red leaves. meant to poison Alex's tea. You destroyed me when you made me like this, Alex said in a deeper, more sinister voice, as she remembered when Claudia possessed her and yielded some of her powers to Alex. The death card doesn't always mean death, you know. It represents change, alteration, adjustment, and even sometimes new life. After all, when the winter ice thaws, new life grows, Alex added cryptically as she got up from the table. Alex had surely changed as a person since obtaining all of Claudia's powers, even if it was by accident. When she first came to Collinwood with her mother, she was a sweet and innocent young lady who was in love and who wanted to make the best of things with her family. After the dark forces of Claudia passed into her body, she had never ever been the same. She was consumed by jealousy and vicious anger, and now she wanted to unleash them all on her, Claudia, the woman who made her this way. I know what you're hiding. Give them to me, Alex, referencing the poison tea leaves as she lifted her arm in the air, causing Claudia to feel choked and levitating off the ground. As Claudia began to feel choked and instinctively lifted her hands from her pockets to her throat, removal of her hands caused the small baggie to fall out of her pocket and onto the floor directly under her. Alex looked down at the floor and saw the red tea leaves. Wixie gave Claudia. She slowly walked towards them. Were these for me? Alex said with an evil grin, then picking up the baggie and letting Claudia fall to the floor, coughing and gasping for air. Alex went over a separate table across her large bedroom that had several glass bottles of water and a container of tea. She carefully picked out 2 leaves and placed them in a small teacup of water. The redness began to slowly dissolve into the water, leaving only a brown leaf in the center floating along in the middle. A toxic tea. Why don't you have the first drink? Alex said as Claudia regained her composure. You don't know what you're doing, Claudia said, jumping up from the soft carpeted floor. I'm doing what you were going to do to me. I know what these leaves do, Alexander said, and in a split-second move, Claudia kicked Alexander, who stood above her in the legs, causing her to lose her balance and fall to the floor. The tea, poisoned with the red leaves given to Claudia to use on Alexander, spilled to Alex's face and hands. Smoke filled the room, but a light smoke coming from Alexander's body. She lay on all fours, her face toward the ground. There was no pain, but there was smoke. Claudia quickly stood up and watched as Alexander's face and hands, arms, and legs began to wither into old age, just as Wixie said it would. Her hair turned to a dark gray. Her face became wrinkled and ravaged by what looked like the hands of time, only to have happen within seconds. In a way, it shocked Claudia to see it happen so quickly. Alex remained on the floor for a few seconds, staring at her hands and not knowing what to do. She looked up and saw Claudia still standing over her with a glazed look on her face. Claudia seemed to be not prepared for what the poison tea leaves would actually do. It was a stark comparison to how Alex looked just seconds ago. Alex, sniffling with her tears in her eyes, got up and walked over to the mirror, the same mirror that Angelique Richard once tried to take the soul of Carolyn and Barnabas into. The woman's face, looking back at Alex, was not the same 20-something young woman she recognized as herself. It was now the age-wrinkled face of a woman in her 80s. The shock was too much. Alexander fainted on the spot. It seemed like Claudia's job was done. Alex had turned into a person no one would ever recognize, no one would ever dream would be the same young, beautiful, vibrant Alexandra Thorne it had been done. In the midst of it all, Claudia quickly gathered up the remaining tea leaves and cleaned the room up, grabbed several of Alex's belongings and put them in a suitcase. She then dragged Alex by the arms down the hall, as quiet as she could, into the upstairs study that once belonged to Quentin Collins, a room that kept every secret of every family member since the dawn of the Collins family. In that study was a secret passage to a secret Collinwood turret that no one had gone into for 200 years. Claudia dragged an unconscious Alex through the tunnels that winded and turned, and within the walls of Collinwood, and pushed the turret door open. Inside was a room she had prepared to make Alex comfortable, a room Alex would never ever be able to escape. Alex finally came to, confused and rubbing her head with pain. Alone and in a turret, she scuffled around searching for some sort of light switch, but found only candles and matches, so she lit a candle and looked around the room as the candle lit bright up the turret. The turret was the brightest room in the whole house, the first room to see the morning sun, as the two small windows pointed east, overlooking the sea. It was a room that for so many years no one went into except the centuries ago, when Barnabas's mother, Naomi, used it as her personal beloved chapel, a room where dark magic couldn't be used, a place where Claudia knew it would be impossible for Alex to use her powers and escape. Alexandra began to have a small panic attack when she realized no one knew where she went or when she left. She looked around the room, hoping to find something she could use to alert whomever was below, but then realized when she tried to push the windows open, they had been boarded up and closed off. Then she walked over to a small mirror on the wall and saw what the tea leaves had done to her face, her hair. She had aged from a bright-eyed blonde beauty to a gray-haired, snarled old woman that she did not recognize. Alex was a loss. She had lost her powers, lost her beauty, and now lost her freedom, destined to be locked away in a place no one would ever look to find her. The tears fell from her face like water from a stream, and in the corner on a dressing formed an 18th century black funeral dress with a long black veil. Alright, so that's the read along. Really good scene setting. I love the fact that Barnabas is like, no, you need to tell me where Maggie is now. Really, really good stuff. Link's going to be in the description box, guys. You guys have a great night.